I need to get the old soapbox out real quick and just, take a bit to complain about something. And before I do, I'm going to preface this by saying that I've defended the resin system in this game. And not only just the resin system as a whole, but how much we get. So that really shows how much I hate this system. And what I'm talking about are the Spiral Abyss buff cards, also known as the Benediction of the Abyss, as far as the wiki goes. I think this system is so boring and so poorly implemented that it is the thing I hate the most about the Abyss and the reason I hate it in general. The best thing we have to hope from this whole system is getting the crit rate buffs, well, crit rate and crit damage. And that buff alone, it doesn't even change your playstyle whatsoever. It just makes big numbers bigger and more consistent, which, who gives a shit? Which, sure, if you're struggling to do the Abyss, that buff is great. It's going to help you quite a bit because it's a big buff. But it's so boring. And that's even if you get that buff. You have to wade through a sea of bullshit, like healing your party like once. That's it. Or an attack buff or defense if you have no defense scalars, elemental mastery if you're not really utilizing that very well, which sure, most of the best teams do. But again, it's goddamn boring. This system is clearly reminiscent of roguelike and roguelike games where you get buffs as you go on and you build up and become stronger. But what makes a good roguelike game, as a big fan of the genre in general, is how much you change your character. In a game like Hades, for example, you go from a very basic build in the beginning, just swinging your weapon with a very basic spell, to doing just absolutely crazy shit by the end of it. And that's what makes it so fun, as well as any good roguelike. Changing your character completely by the end is one of the most fun parts. If you were just doing the exact same thing but with more damage, that would be a bad game. And that is exactly what the Abyss is. Not a single one of these cards even meaningfully changes our playstyle. We have a couple that reduces charge attack stamina cost or refunds a skill if you get a kill, I think, or something like that. But those are extremely rare and they're usually not even worth taking. And then we get the garbage choice of picking a floor card or a chamber card. And the chamber card is usually just a slightly more powerful version of a floor card with a downside, and it only lasts for one floor, which is, again, only going to be useful if you're fishing for a single floor, which sure is a good strategy if you are struggling with the Abyss, but otherwise you would never take it because it's not going to help you through the whole thing unless you're on the final floor already. But even these cards are not exciting. They're just slightly stronger than permanent buffs and really just another option if you got offered garbage, which is very likely the case. Now, what could they do to change this system? They could do any number of things. What I would like to see is just a complete overhaul of this system as a whole. No part of it is worth saving. We could have any number of different kind of buffs, whether it be something like the Bloodstained Chivalry set, where you would just get, kill an enemy, and then your charge attacks don't cost stamina and do extra damage for a brief amount of time. It doesn't have to be a set bonus we already have. It could be any number of things. It could be an increased attack speed buff based on how much missing health you have. Something that would actually change your character. It would make the Spiral Abyss a little bit more interesting week to week or, bi-weekly. Because right now, the Spiral Abyss is not fun to look forward to. Most times, when it changes, we honestly just dread what is coming up next. Is it going to be worse than what we have? Because usually the answer is yes. And even if you're a whale who can just stomp the Abyss easily, there's always a chance that a floor might just be hell. Like back when we had floor 11 where we had to defend the monolith, everyone who didn't have Venti was having a nightmare of a time doing it, and it wasn't fun for really anyone. We felt like we were being sold a character that we could not buy at the time, and it was just a pain in the ass. I didn't have Venti at the time, and it was hell. It was the most unenjoyable Spiral Abyss I've ever done. But back to the cards, it would just make the whole Spiral Abyss experience a lot more exciting if we could just choose more exciting buffs, especially if those buffs could accumulate all the way from floor 9 all the way up to the end of floor 12. Obviously, the Spiral Abyss would have to become a lot more challenging overall to accommodate for the extreme spike in power we could potentially get. But imagine the cool builds you would see people sharing by saying holy shit, look at this crazy run of buffs I got this week, or like it would just create a lot of replayability in a system that currently a lot of people hate. Whether it be the difficulty of the Abyss for newer players or more casual players, or the fact that whales just get bored as shit just stomping the Abyss in like 30 seconds every week, it would breathe such a breath of fresh air into the Abyss and really reinvigorate it for so many people. Because I think even people who don't typically like rogue games could at least appreciate the fact that that kind of system in rogue games is what makes people repeat the exact same gameplay loop hundreds of times to keep experiencing it over and over again, but in different ways. Again, I said earlier, like people could share crazy builds of crazy buffs they could get, and like even if you don't really understand how to build, you can at least see that like, hey, I have a whole bunch of attack speed, makes my Diluc a lot of fun. Now, I think the main concern with a system change like this would be that the Abyss may become a little bit too RNG dependent, because right now the RNG is pretty minimal. You can fish for better buffs, but these buffs aren't powerful enough to make or break the difference, or make or break, but they are strong enough that if you are just barely on the line of getting like 36 star from 35 star, the crit buff can make a big difference. So you should come back and do it, you know, do the Abyss every day and just see if you get better buffs. But that is a hellish experience because it's so boring. These buffs, again, aren't fun. Some people might find them fun, but I highly doubt it. But even if it did become extremely RNG and you could potentially get a buff, maybe they introduce rarities like common, rare, epic, legendary, whatever, and there's a very small chance of legendary ones. Even if they were extremely powerful, at least the Abyss would be more fun to repeat. I know I like roguelike games so much that if they did it well, I would probably just play the Abyss just for fun, even after I've already gotten all my stars and the rewards for the week, just because it would be an enjoyable way to play the game. Especially if at the bare minimum, you could just get like basic stats like attack speed or cooldown reduction that currently we can't get on artifacts or in any other way other than through things like the Anemo Resonance or characters like Chongyun C2 giving us a little bit of CDR and attack speed. Jean C2, obviously these are rare stats and they are huge for your character. They change the way you play massively, especially if given in the right quantities. Obviously attack speed can basically just be considered a basic damage buff just like you could with crit, but it's more fun than that, especially if you like seeing characters attack fast like I do. A good example of something more meaningful is the fact that you could buff charge attacks. There's a number of different ways you could do it. You could reduce the stamina cost, remove the stamina cost, make them just stronger. And while that would make a character like Hu Tao stronger because she's already a top tier character who uses them, it would help a character like Kaching who is basically made or broken on her charge attacks. And good God, she needs all the help she can get. That girl is freaking suffering. And that is just one example that comes to my mind. Obviously, there's any number of things they could do. The sky is the limit, and helping characters that aren't currently really viable would be the best way to go, in my opinion. Now, personally, I'm fine with the blessing system, and I'm fine with the chamber bonuses. I find those to be at least moderately interesting, and honestly, it's what I would like to see more out of the card system. Just interesting. I think the blessing is a perfect example of what it could be. Those are usually interesting, even if they are just to sell us the character of the character of the banner. I don't care, because at least they change things up a little bit, even if 9 times out of 10 I just kind of ignore it and do whatever I was going to do anyway. But in any case, that's just my thoughts, because it's a system I really hate, and I hate it so much because of how little it's trying. I would be less mad if the system just didn't even exist at all, because right now it is like 1% effort. It is sad, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it. You know, what do you think? Like, what would be a cool buff that you would want to see out of the cards? Maybe you hate the card system entirely. Maybe you like it as it is for some reason. I don't know why. Either way, I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Thank you for watching. Become a member of the channel if you want to. Support me on Patreon if you want to. Either way, I'm just happy you're here watching the video. Join my Discord if you want to join my community. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Freeze to the core.